As we're all very well aware, recently the folks at Line 6 released their Firmware 3.50 for the Helix and HX Stomp family of products. What an update it was. Every time we have a firmware update though, I always like to do a video a little bit after called the Hidden Gems. And the reason I like to do this is a lot of times there's a lot of changes in the firmware that are not maybe as overt a feature as something like adding a new amp model or adding a new effects model. Maybe little features that could easily go unnoticed, but could also be extremely useful. So today I'm going to dive into the Firmware 3.5, show you a few of these hidden gem features that hopefully you haven't missed, but could be easily missed. And I oftentimes do this based off of questions I've received after the firmware has been out for a little while. So without further ado, let's dive over to HX Edit and take a look and see what some of these hidden gems are in our new Firmware 3.5 update. All right, so here we are over in HX Edit. We have our Firmware 3.5 up, and you'll notice that I have a little preset on called Snapshot Control. This is a really interesting feature that I've had some questions about that a lot of folks are kind of confused about. And if we go over to the release notes for Firmware 3.5, we'll notice this section down here. It says disable snapshot control over parameter assignments. And we read through this, and a lot of folks are finding that they're still rather confused as to what this new feature actually does. So let's head back to HX Edit. Let's do this. Let's take a step-by-step approach here. So let's say I have a preset that I have made 4 snapshots for that works through a clean, kind of a push edge of breakup sound to an overdrive sound to a lead sound. And let's say that I want to add a delay in here, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to add one of my favorites, just the stereo transistor tape. And you'll notice that I have a mix setting of 29%. Now, let's say that I wanted to assign one of these parameters to be controlled by a foot switch, which is oftentimes something that a lot of folks might want to do. Let's say I wanted to be able to control my mix control on my delay. But let's say that I wanted to assign this to, say, foot switch number 7. And I didn't want this setting of 29% anymore. I wanted to be able to bounce back and forth between, let's say, 20% is a minimum, and at times I want to bump the mix up to 50%. So I come over, as we've always known, in our bypass controller assign tab. I set my minimum mix to 20%, my maximum mix to 50%. I come back over here to my preset now, put my Helix into stomp mode, stomp box mode, and now on foot switch 7, I have the mix control. So if I press this, I can now toggle between a mix of 20% and 50% on my transistor tape. Wonderful, great. Here's the problem though. I've left this at 50% now. What happens when I go back and I switch between my different snapshots? You'll notice I bounce back to 29% there, 29% there. So on my snapshot 4, lead, overdrive, and push, I'm at 29%. When I come back to my clean, it bounces back to 50%. And I need to go back over here to my mix control, and I can then bounce it between 20 and 50. Again, if I go back to a different snapshot, you'll notice up here, snapshot 2 bounces back to that original setting of 29. Now I can use my mix control on that snapshot to bounce back and forth. I'll leave it at 20. Now when I go back to clean, I'm at 20, push, I'm at 20, but then overdrive, I'm back at 29, and lead, I'm back at 29. Because I have my snapshot edit set to recall in my global settings, when I do make one of these changes, it just recalls it next time I go there. Well, you can see how confusing this would be. What if I wanted to just leave this set and not switch between snapshots? So there's a really cool function that maybe you noticed already. If I go back to my bypass controller assign, here's the parameter that I'm controlling with foot switch 7. Notice this new little line right here. It says Snapshot Control. Well, right now it's on, so it is being controlled by my changing of snapshots. So that's normal behavior. But if I turn this to off, that parameter will no longer be controlled by snapshots. And you will now notice when I switch between the different snapshots, this, and you can see them changing up here as I press them with my foot on my Helix, this just stays at 20% now. If I go back to stomp mode, switch this up to 50%, back, switch through my snapshots, it stays at 50%. So it's no longer being controlled by snapshots. it's going to stay where I want it to be. So let's say I'm on my lead snapshot and I've bumped this up to 50% because I want a very high mix. And then I'm heading back into a different part of the song and I want to go to the push, but I want to keep that up at 50% before manually moving that back down to 20%. I can now do that. I can assign a parameter to be controlled by a foot switch, but then disable the control of the snapshot over that parameter. So I hope that that answers the question that I've received a lot about what this new feature does. And I think it's a wonderful new addition and something that a lot of folks, if they know it's there, can really make good use of. Moving on from there now, you'll notice I have a new preset up here called Dual IR. If we come down to IR here, you'll notice we still have our single IR 1024, IR 2048. But if we pull this down now, we also have a dual IR block, which will allow us to be able to load two 1024 point IRs into a single block. And what we have here is IRA, IRB, and both. So we can come over here and I'm going to select IRA and it is selected as my JS RAV 212 fathead from my RAV 212 impulse response bundle that I have available up on Line 6 Marketplace. I'll have the link to that below if anybody's interested in it. And we can control the low cut, the high cut, the level. We can pan this left or right now in stereo, which is a wonderful feature. So I could say, I'm going to pan that one over to the left. I can also have normal or inverted polarity. I can go over to IRB, set it to a completely different IR. This case, it'll be from the same bundle, but using a different microphone. This is the Warm 251, Warm Audio 251 tube mic. This is the Cascade Fathead. I've panned that one all the way to the left. Let's come to IRB and I'll pan that all the way to the right. Keep the polarity on normal. So now I've got two different IRs panned out left and right. I'm not saying you should do this. I'm just showing that there is the possibility. And then when we come to the both tab, we have this ability to delay one or the other to possibly line the timing up between different IRs from different manufacturers or for whatever effect that we want to create. Utilizing that, we also have a mix control. So this new dual IR block is very handy. Look out in the future, I'll very likely do a more in-depth video about this feature. But just in case a lot of folks missed the fact that we can now have dual 1024 point IRs in the same block, in stereo, the ability to pan them, it would be a shame for somebody who uses IRs to not realize we have that ability, especially since we have the new cabs that a lot of folks are very happy with within the new Helix update. And speaking of the new cabs, here is another little preset I call dual cab. So let's come over to our cab section. You'll notice when we click it, by default, a single cab comes up so that we can choose which cab we want. We have our legacy cab. But if we go to the dual cabs, what you're going to notice is there's a little button up here. And I have mentioned this before in another video I did, but I wanted to kind of hone in on it because I've still had some more questions about this. If I click this, it's a little chain link, and here the chain link is broken. Here it is intact. So let's start with it broken. When I call up a new cab, you'll notice called up the 110 US Princess, and I get the 110 US Princess over here, but I get the 212 Jazz cab here. As I switch through, you'll notice that all of these cabs seem to always paired up with the same 212 cab over here. Well, what if we didn't want to always have to say, you know what, I'm going to choose the 112 Cali extension, and now I've got to click this, and I got to go and choose the 112 Cali extension again if I so desired. What we can actually do is come up here, click the little chain link so that it's locked. So there's a complete chain link. Now, when I switch cabs, you'll notice that the cabs actually switch in unison with one another. So if I pick a 412 Greenback 25, both of them come up as a 412 Greenback 25. If I pick the 412 1968 T75, they both come up as that. 412 Cali V30, they both come up as that. So that's going to be a very handy feature for a lot of folks that I've heard say, why is it that every time I pick a cab, I'm not getting the same cab again with it, right? So we can lock this, choose one, and then make our decision from there what we want our second cab to be. So very handy, something that can be easily missed. So that's a very handy control that could help a lot of folks with their workflow to just get things done quicker. All right, so that's what I have for you today as far as hidden gems. Not a whole lot, but some very useful features that I think once we understand how they work properly can really help us to get our presets working in the way that we want them to, and maybe even allow for a much quicker workflow. So I hope that that was enjoyable. I hope it was helpful. Please like the video. Please share it with anybody who you think would get some use out of watching that. I have seen not only a lot of these questions posted in internet forums, but I've also received a lot of them. I thought I would do this video just to try to clear that up. So if you do know anybody who has these questions, just point them in the direction of this video and hopefully it will answer their questions. Also, please subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell notification to get notified when I put new content out. Thank you guys so much again for sharing your time with me. I'll be back really soon with some more. Ciao for now.